Hello everyone, back to today's first video, doing JMA Friday for today's first video. As always on a Friday, we're having a look at the weather for the month ahead with the Japanese and CFS V2 models. Later on today, we'll have a look at the weather for the next week to 10 days, so sort of a shorter range time frame, but this one is a bit of an extended one going out to the month ahead. And this takes us more or less to the end of July, actually, with this update. So we've had very dry conditions over the past few weeks now. Been very dry spell. Some places have recorded no measurable rain whatsoever during June, and are likely to stay that way for the final day or so of the month. So some places will have a completely dry month from start to finish, which is very unusual, even in the summer. That's very unusual for this country. So it has been exceptionally dry and also very warm as well. We'll see whether these dry and hot conditions are expected to continue into July. So hang around and we'll have a look at that. So as I say, later on today we'll have a look at the weather for the next week to 10 days, and a lot of updates coming up over the weekend. I'll talk you through those at the end of the video. But we're going to begin by having a look at the 500 millibar height anomaly flowcharts from the JMA model, broken down into weekly periods. So the first weekly period will take us from today, the 29th of June, and that will go through to the 6th of July. So we're looking at the North Pole view down. Here we're looking at the Northern Hemisphere view down, and blue extrapolates to low pressure, and yellow, orange and red will be extrapolating to high pressure. So this is where the British Isles is, just here, and of course that's the North Pole of the Northern Hemisphere. Around there, 500 millibars is an area in the absolute high pressure and low pressure are being moved around by the jet stream, and that is essentially what weather is, a movement of air masses by the jet. So you can see in the week ahead, we've got this big ridge of above average heights over and a little bit to the east of the UK, but it also extends through the Atlantic, and it actually ties back into a ridge that's across the northeastern parts of America. So a huge area of high pressure from the northeast of America up towards Scandinavia and stretching across the Atlantic as well. Below average heights to the north around Greenland, that's where the jet stream is, of course, up there, way to our north, and also below average heights down to our south. It continues to look quite unsettled across the sort of the southwestern part of Europe into the Mediterranean. But for us, we're under that ridge of high pressure, so you'd expect a lot of dry and very warm, locally hot weather to continue in the week ahead. That's week 2. It takes us from the 6th through to the 13th of July, and no real changes. Look at this, above average heights centred right over top of the UK. Below average heights continue to be away to our northwest. The flow and the jet is doing something a bit like that, so remain on the warm side of the jet. We're underneath a ridge of high pressure. The prolonged dry spell, maybe by this point we can even call it a drought, the hot and dry spell continues up to the middle of July on this run of the JMA. And then we go through to weeks 3 and 4. It takes us from the 13th through to the 27th of July. So we're getting towards the end of the second month of summer 2018, still with a signal for above average heights to be close to the country, but a little bit centred to our east, with below average heights through the Atlantic around there, doing something like that with the flow and with the jet streams. So we're pulling up a southerly wind there, so that could be very warm, locally hot into the second half of July. The only difference is that with the trough of low pressure closer to us in the Atlantic, it could be starting to break things down. Remember, this is a 2-weekly anomaly, so it could be transitional, and over time, it's possible that after, certainly risking some big thunderstorms, it's possible that over time, we might be getting more of an influence from the jet stream and from the Atlantic there. Maybe something like week 3 is sees a thundery breakdown, and then week 4 goes into more of an Atlantic type situations. So you always have to bear in mind with a 2-weekly anomaly that you could be got transitional periods going on. But overall, I think we can say that the JMA really wants to keep things hot and dry for July, certainly through the first half of the month anyway. So this is the mid-latitude and tropical view with the JMA. So British Isles just here in the top right-hand corner of the chart as you're looking at it. You can't see Scandinavia and the North Pole on this view, but we know we've got this huge ridge from northeastern parts of America across the Atlantic into the UK, and then it also extends up to our northeast up there with the jet stream in that sort of position way to our north. There's the below average heights down around Spain and Portugal. So I expect this to be a significantly warmer than average week. That's what the model is showing. Temperature anomalies are coming out warmer than average for the UK and for most of Europe as well. Anomalies somewhere between around 1 and 3 degrees above average. And not only that, it's also a dry week as well. Drier than average from the 29th of June to the 6th of July. The week ahead comes out with drier than average rainfall anomalies. You notice it is a little bit wetter than average to our south though. That's from a trough that's off the coast of Portugal and around Biscay. So to our south it is a bit wetter there. That's thunderstorms which might threaten southern parts of the country, southwestern parts of the country at times, but overall still coming out drier than average for the bulk of the UK and Ireland actually in the week ahead. That's week 2, it's days 10 to 16, the 6th through to the 13th of July. And this one, we just placed that huge ridge right over top of the country. So that looks very settled for the second week of July, to say the least. Precipitation anomalies are coming out drier than average. I would suspect with such a big ridge, there'd be no measurable rainfall at all, if that's right, during that week, or certainly very minimal rainfall anyway, up to the middle of July. Temperature anomalies are on the warmer than average side as well, maybe not quite as much as we saw in week 1, but even so, we're talking about temperature anomalies around 1 to 2 degrees above average, particularly so for England and Wales. So dry and hot for the first half of July with the JMA today. And then we go through to weeks 3 and 4, takes us from the 13th through to 27th of July with above average heights over and to the east of the country. Come over here, that's over the chart. Below average heights are in the Atlantic, so it's a southerly flow, which of course will be very warm. The only difference is that we are lowering pressure in the Atlantic, which might eventually, after a thundery breakdown, might eventually start to shift that ridge away to our east and possibly turn us more unsettled in that 2-weekly period. So the temperature anomaly is still coming out above average for weeks 3 and 4. Less so, however, compared to what we see for weeks 1 and 2. But still above average, around a degree above average perhaps at the maximum. Notice it's quite cool out in the Atlantic. We've got a lot of cold sea survey temperature anomalies at the moment in the northern part of the Atlantic Ocean. And as far as precipitation is concerned, so it's still drier than average, even with that trough of low pressure in the Atlantic, we're still coming out drier than average. So a very dry July being signalled here by the JMA. And of course, after what's happened in June, with, as I say, some places recording no measurable rainfall and most other places just having very minimal levels of rainfall during June. This is a very dry July following a very dry June. So I think thoughts, certainly from the JMA perspective, are turning towards a summer drought now, looking quite serious from a rainfall perspective. Let's see if the CFS V2 is in agreement though. So again, these are 500 millibar heights. They're broken down into weekly periods. The first weekly period will take us from the 29th of June through to the 5th of July. And we've got this huge ridge of above average height centred over the UK, also stretches out into the Atlantic and actually ties in with a larger ridge that's over northeastern parts of America as well. We've got the below average heights down to the southwest, and we've got the below average heights around Greenland. We've got a split in the jet stream actually, so some of the energy is going off up there around Greenland and up to the north of Scandinavia. Some of the energy is to the south as well through the central part of the Atlantic and going into the Mediterranean. Mediterranean. So a little bit of a split in the jet stream, but it's perfect agreement that between the JMA and the CFS in terms of the synoptic pressure setup, pressure distribution for the week ahead. Perfect agreement for high pressure to be really dominant in the week ahead. And this continues into week 2 as well. This takes us from the 6th through to the 12th of July, with again that large area of above average height centering right over top of the country. High pressure is anchored, it's rooted over the top of the UK with the below average heights around Greenland and down across the Med. Again, the split in the jet continues. Some of the energy is going off up there, some of the energy is going down there, and we remain under this ridge, bringing in these warm or hot easterly winds during week 2. And then we're through to week 3, and this is the 13th through to the 19th of July, and it just goes on with this large area of above average heights, again centred over the top of the country. Heights are lowering to our north, so possibly signs that the jet stream is reinvigorating a little bit to our north, possibly forcing this high pressure a little bit further southwards. And doing something like that with the flow, with the jet stream. That might just be starting to bring more of a westerly flow and some cooler, more showery conditions to the very far north of the country. But essentially up to the second half of July, we remain under that high pressure, very dry, and no doubt really warm or hot conditions as well. Just signs of a change for week 4. So this is a very long way out. This is the 20th through to the 26th of July, with the above average heights moving further southwards. So its centre is appears to be sort of to the southwest of Ireland, and that would start to bring in a little bit more of an influence from the jet stream. We do something like that with the flow and with the jet stream as well, possibly hinting that for that a sort of final full week of July, it's turning more unsettled. Now, this is a very, very long way off. It's week 4. It's at the most unreliable end of all of this. So great big pinch of salt needed, but possibly just signs of a little bit more unsettled, a little bit cooler there from the 20th to 26th of July. But overall, these models are agreeing on a very dry and potentially hot July coming up. So this is how the temperature anomaly is looking from the CFS V2 for the week ahead. This takes us from the 29th of June through to the 5th of July, substantially warmer than average for the UK, those parts of Europe. Notice where it is very, very cool in the week ahead across eastern and southeastern parts of Europe, and also back into western parts of Russia. So it's one of nature's balancing acts. If one part of the continent of Europe is warm, another part will tend to be cool, and in this scenario it's the north and the west of Europe that is warm, and it's the south and the southeast of Europe that is cool. So there is cool air going on, it's just a long way to our east and southeast. If you know anyone that's off for a holiday in Greece, they're going to have really quite subdued temperatures in the week ahead. Then we go through to week 2, and the heat wave continues basically. So this takes us from the 6th through to 12th of July, substantially hotter than average. I mean, we're talking about temperature anomalies there for the UK and Ireland between 2 and 3 degrees above average. So that's for the middle of summer. That is going to be a very hot week indeed coming up there. 90 Fahrenheit plus temperatures would be expected there, I would have thought, if that is right, from the 6th through to the 12th of July. And it goes on for week 3 as well. Another hot week there, 13th to the 19th of July, with CFS V2 comes out substantially hotter than average during that middle part of the month. Week 4 is rounding it all off. We're still above average even in week 4, even with more of a west-northwesterly flow. The temperature anomaly still coming out above average, but it's less so. It is lessening compared to weeks 1, 2 and 3. So the temperature anomaly is lowering a bit, it's turning a little bit cooler, but even so still coming out above average even in week 4. Notice by week 4 those warmer than average temperature anomalies are beginning to be pushed over towards the east of Europe. That is possibly signs of a realignment of the troughs and the ridges. If it starts to get hotter in the east and the southeast, expect the temperature of Europe, expect the temperature to drop in the north and the northwest of Europe. Again, it's one of nature's balancing acts. So if it begins to hot up in the east and southeast, it will probably cool down in the west and the northwest. But that's what kind of like what it's hinting at for that week from the 20th, 26th of July. But before that, it's very, very hot, really, for much of northern and western Europe. As far as precipitation is concerned, finally CFS V2, again, rainfall anomalies from the 29th of June to the 5th of July, substantially drier than average, a really dry week coming up. And it is wetter to our south. That's thunderstorms around Biscay, across parts of western France as well. They might just fringe in to far southern and southwestern parts of the country in the week ahead, but most places, particularly central and northern areas, are going to stay dry and hot in the week ahead. Week 2, rainfall anomalies from the 6th through to the 12th of July. They're coming out significantly drier than average as well. Week 3, precipitation anomalies also coming out drier than average. By this point, I think we'll be talking about a drought. If we get to the week of the 13th to the 19th of July with barely any rainfall falling across the country after what's happened in June, I think by this point, pretty much we'll be in a drought type situation. And then we go through to week 4, and this is when it looks like the troughs and ridges just starting to realign a little bit differently. There's no sign of it going wetter than average, but precipitation in week 4 from the 20th to 26th of July is average, which tells us, either two things. It tells us that either the model has lost the signal, which is possible, or it is turning more unsettled. It's not unsettled enough yet to be having wetter than average conditions, but some sort of breakdown is beginning to take place, and that would tie in with the 500 millibar height anomaly. So the 20th to the 26th of July might be the week where it begins to break. And of course, you never know if that's going to be temporary anyway. It might only be a brief interruption, and then we very quickly get back to high pressure. And it's at week 4, so it's really unreliable too. And essentially, in the first sort of 2-3 weeks of July, we're looking at further hot and dry weather. So the CFS and the JMA are keeping it hot and dry for much of July, you have to say. And as I say, by the time we get through to the middle of July, if we're still seeing barely any rainfall, I think we'll be talking about a drought by that point, really, across many parts of the country. So if you're involved in agriculture, if you're a farmer or a grower, then quite a concerning, quite a worrying JMA Friday this week from a rainfall perspective. And we'll just have to see how it goes. Hopefully, you never know, those thunderstorms next week might be a little bit more widespread, but certainly from a long-range model perspective, there's barely any rainfall coming up before, at the very least, the second half of July. Right, come back later on when we'll have a look at the weather for the next week to 10 days in detail. So that'll be with you this afternoon. But that's all for now, and thanks for watching.